you so much for this invitation, and great to be here. And thank you, Peter, also for the introduction originally. So yeah, exactly, Anna, as you said, I actually spent 5 years in San Francisco. So I am originally German. I used to work actually maybe similar to Peter also in the finance world, in private banking. I was also managing portfolios across asset classes, but you would say what we would say now traditionally. So not yet a focus on impact, but I don't know, maybe it's this millennial thinking. At some point it was really like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here right now. This doesn't feel meaningful enough to me. I got to change something. And without really knowing what that something was, when I went to San Francisco to do my MBA, and then I set the focus on social entrepreneurship, that's when I learned about impact investing, or I heard the term impact investing for the first time, which really also was about creating a significant or change in the world versus, let's say, exclusion criteria and things like that, what we've heard before. That's really when I got hooked, where I said, like, I can combine, my finance skills with something that's close to my heart. So that was like 8 years ago now. So I've been in the impact investing world since then, 5 years of those in San Francisco. And now since September 2019, been back here in Germany. And always been working with Tonic, with mostly private entrepreneurs or private investors. So Tonic really is this global network of impact investors, mainly wealthy individuals, families, a few foundations, often also actually family foundations, and helping them finding impact investments, building out their portfolio. But a lot of them are really also thinking about systemic change. How can I use my smaller capital to really change, the system, the financial system, how it works? Not a small goal or small vision to achieve, but that's what they're working on. And that's also like, Peter, together with their single family office, really, I would say like the pioneers in impact investing. They don't have the biggest capital, like pension funds and others certainly have more capital. But what I feel, they really have the passion to do impact and to achieve really impact that you can, yes, measure, or at least really there is an impact in the real world that we can see and that we can feel. So that's certainly generally, I guess, a difference between impact investors and traditional investors. I agree with Peter. We also have done a survey of our members, like what kind of financial returns you are achieving. And overall, yes, ideally they want to achieve adequate risk-adjusted financial returns. Over the last couple of years, there has something growing, which is called catalytic capital, where it's about really having a catalyzing effect, creating more impact, where maybe also investors are okay to achieve a maybe slightly lower financial return or take a higher risk on the other hand, to achieve more impact. So that's something that definitely is out there. And there again, you mostly see that with individual investors who really like are burning for an issue and are saying, for me, it's really important that this impact happens. Then I'm also okay to, in one asset class or in a few investments to achieve a little less return or take a little higher risk. So just wanted to mention that and also follow up on one of the questions in the chat. But yeah, your question around difference, right, between US and Europe, or maybe specifically Germany. As Peter mentioned, indeed, I think in the US, impact investing started slightly earlier. One reason, honestly, for that is that in Europe, a lot of the social problems were solved by the governments, or just by the social system, which just doesn't exist in the US. So that certainly is a difference. Also now with this EU taxonomy coming out, with just, maybe you have heard of the EU Green Deal, that is also something that started in Europe and not yet in the US, although now actually the US also is jumping on onto the wagon and they try to collaborate. So that's certainly one big difference why maybe impact investing started a little bit earlier in the US. Another reason that I can feel, and that's maybe generally about entrepreneurship, and obviously I've been in San Francisco, the Bay Area, so a little bit the heart of entrepreneurship in general, is a cultural difference. I'm not sure if you have come across it already, but sometimes in Germany, if you say you've started a company, didn't quite work out, right? You closed it, then here it's seen as a failure. In the US, it's seen that great, you learned a lot, right? They rather want to invest in somebody who has already started 2 or 3 companies and, maybe, didn't work out, closed them properly, but learned a lot. There it's seen like as learning. So that's certainly a cultural shift that's still, or a cultural difference that's still there generally. And certainly also in the social entrepreneurship world. And yeah, Peter puts some thumbs up. So I think just being vocal about that, being clear about that, I think slowly it's starting to also be in investors' minds, but sometimes I guess, especially in traditional, if you talk to more traditional investors, they might still have that mindset. So that's certainly one difference between the 2 regions. Yeah, you also mentioned or like asked me to speak a little bit about what different opportunities I see currently. I definitely see since I'm back. So when I left in 2014, impact investing was really pretty small. Since the last 3 years, definitely accelerating. Also, obviously, the formation of the Bundesinitiative Impact Investing helped a few players, all of them, Peter, that you mentioned. Maybe just adding on to that, you already did mention Impact Hub. Indeed, they are a good accelerator. The BMW Foundation in Munich actually also started a accelerator program, which is called RISE. So that could be interesting as well. And then what I see in terms of impact investors also investing in migrant entrepreneurs, it's interesting. On the one hand side, definitely from private investors or business angels, we see that they actively also want to support more like first-time entrepreneurs or first-time fund managers if they're out there, where often like the traditional finance world says like, oh, you need a track record of 10 years, already have done, 3 startups. So there is like this gap kind of in funding is where I at least feel with our tonic investors, they're a little bit more aware of it and saying like, okay, hey, this is exactly where my capital now can be catalytic to really support entrepreneurs. So that's one. Interestingly enough, also crowdfunding. A few crowdfunding rounds have been pretty successful. So maybe that could also be one option to not only go after the big family offices or foundations, but maybe even consider a crowdfunding round. I was just talking to the founders of Africa Green Tech, and they said they actually had a pretty big crowdfunding round. Even more, they were more successful than actually getting bigger capital from family offices or foundations. So that's maybe something to not keep out of mind, because I think the crowd, right, people sometimes understand the vision of the entrepreneur a little bit better, and I feel more like drawn to it, and or maybe easier to then also put a little bit of capital in. So that's another thought. And then also interestingly enough, I mean, we as Tonic also a bunch of our members are investing in funds or in VC funds. And lately I've heard a few, and just mentioning a few, that they specifically want to, again, invest into migrant entrepreneurs. So there's one Village Capital out of the UK/US specifically mentioned that. Women World's Banking Fund, Chi Impact out of Switzerland mentioned they want to specifically support migrant entrepreneurs. So that's, I know you have another session, right, about VC investing. So that's certainly going to be interesting shift to see that also those fund managers, or let's say wake up or see that, hey, there's a gap. That's where we want to have an impact. Yeah, how are we doing on time? Okay, still pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, I think you did mention also, Anna, to me that maybe, what should an entrepreneur look out for, or mention specifically to really address impact investors. So as it's called, impact investing, what we see from our investors, they really want to see the impact. Like, what is your theory of change behind it? Like, what problem do you want to solve with your solution? Who are you addressing with that? Yes, the UN Sustainable Development Goals is like one framework that actually is used pretty broadly. So, I mean, we don't want to see, I don't know, all 17 different, pictures put on there. But if you say like, hey, really, be it, let's say, SDG 2, zero hunger, or SDG 6, clean water, sanitation, this is what I'm focusing on. If you use one of those things, yes, it's also helpful, right, to get like an idea already what you're working on. So really getting out the impact part certainly is super helpful. And yeah, what we do here in terms of, let's say, due diligence or analysis from investors, certainly a big part is on the entrepreneur or on the entrepreneurial team. And so any kind of, let's say, maybe, you know, your personal story, why are you working on this solution? You know, what you know, brings you in, hearing your vulnerability around that really also goes a long way. Let's say with the like real like impact investors, private impact investors. I do want to say maybe with the more traditional family office, big foundations, maybe you want to be careful, build a relationship also with the entrepreneur, with the investor. We always say it's a we diligence. So it's not only about the investor, right? Looking if they want to invest in you. You as entrepreneur also want to see if you want them as an investor, if you actually match. So yeah, that's maybe over a quick overview, and then happy to dive into more questions.